Hi everyone, and welcome back to the book adaptation universe. So, it is time for us to bid farewell to Middle-earth again, with the final movie in the Hobbit trilogy. So for me, the Hobbit has been a mixed bag, in no small part because it's a 3-part adaptation of a 365-page book. Back in 2012, I stated that if Peter Jackson was actually going to go through with this, then he better not leave any stone unturned in terms of plot points from the book. I guess he heard me, because it seems like we got everything from the book and more in these films, which didn't exactly translate well to screen because that meant we had to sit through a lot of filler scenes. Will the defining chapter of this saga, The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies, make this trilogy worth it? Let's follow our heroes to Middle-earth one last time and find out. Welcome to Short and to the Point, where I review movies in 5 minutes or less, or your money back.
Hobbits are peace-loving folks, you know. They're never in a hurry and they take things slow. They don't like to travel away from home. They just like to eat and be left alone. But one day Bilbo was asked to go on a big adventure to the caves below to help some dwarves get back their gold that was stolen by a dragon in the days of old. Bilbo back from the Grindy Hall. Bilbo back, bravest little hobbit of them all.
Our story begins with Smaug frying Lake Town to a crisp, following our hero's attack on him in the previous film. After Smaug is dealt with, our heroes resume searching for the Arkenstone, while the citizens of Lake Town attempt to recuperate. Bard, now the leader of the townspeople, sets his sights on the treasure of the Lonely Mountain that Thorin promised the citizens a share of to rebuild their lives. Unfortunately, Thorin has come down with a bad case of dragon sickness and refuses to part with his treasure. To make matters worse, the Elven King Thundriel brings his army to the mountain, intent on seizing a treasure located within it, while Azog and his orc army march to the mountain, intent on wiping everyone out and claiming it as their own. Man, with so much approaching this one location, this has to be an epic finale, right? Well, in some ways it is, and in some ways it is not. Let's look at some of the negatives first. Like in the previous two movies, the Battle of the Five Armies features some flimsy connections to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The most notable one occurs fairly early in the story, and despite the build-up it got in the last two films, our heroes deal with the threat rather easily. It is treated as a cliffhanger, but the plot point is never directly referenced for the rest of the film, even though it comes back in a big way in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I also wasn't a big fan of how this movie handled Bilbo. He still plays an important role in the story, but once the Battle of the Five Armies starts, he pretty much gets pushed to the side. I know this isn't his fight, but I would have liked to have seen him do something significant since this is the climax of the story, and that lessened the impact of his return home for me. Ironically enough, Bilbo is one of the few characters to receive any definitive story closure, while other characters' stories kind of just stop, and that's especially glaring since some of these people /dwarves /elves do not return for the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Maybe the writers were trying to avoid having a plethora of endings like the Return of the King did, I'm not sure. Also, the setup to the battle could have been better executed, as two of the titular Five Armies show up for no other reason than the plot says so. Okay, let's look at the positives now. I did like how certain things were illustrated in this movie, such as a nightmare sequence generated from Thorin's greed, and the battle against Sauron. While they were a tad hard to follow, and in the Sauron fight's case, seizure-inducing, I liked how unconventional they were. As for the big battle itself, while some of the comedy relief and CGI could get distracting, it was still a rousing fight, and I liked how it could get creative at times, such as where the characters fought and how enemies were defeated. I also liked Bard for his quick thinking in regards to protecting his people. The battle had a good sense of camaraderie, and despite my issues with how he was used, I liked Bilbo himself. He was still likably awkward, all of his actions were in character, and his final moment on camera was a good way to close out his story arc. Speaking of story arcs, because of some clunky and on-the-nose dialogue, the plot point concerning Thorin's greed can come across as abruptly introduced, despite the fact that it was hinted at in the desolation of Smaug, and some heavy-handed drama does generate from it, though at the very least, Richard Armitage's performance keeps Thorin's greed from being an informed attribute. So overall, I think The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies is a decent film. The acting is fine, and it was nice to see everything coming together, but the fact that this movie is essentially one giant battle sequence can get draining, and the lack of resolution for some of the story arcs leaves a lot to be desired. It aimed high, but it did not leave me feeling like I had just been on an incredible journey, and I'm going to give this film 6 Rings of Power out of a possible 10, and if you like The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, then I say go see this film. If not, then just wait for it to come on TV. This has been Short and to the Point, and I review movies in 5 minutes or less, or your money back. Now if you'll excuse me, I must go replenish my movie funds, so I can go see some of the movies that are no doubt going to get Oscar nominations. I will see you all next time. Bye.